Welcome back to another episode of Keeping It Real.
Estate related.
Nailed
Nailed
it.
it.
We are awful on these introductions, but today we're going to be talking about seller's disclosures, requirements. Are they good? Are they bad? What purpose do they serve?
Sure. I'll answer the good or bad question first. Good for both parties. Sellers oftentimes think, oh, I don't want to fill this out. I don't want them to know everything bad about the house. And I tell people, this is what's going to protect you. You tell a buyer everything about your home, they can't come back at you later and say, you didn't tell us about this.
Right.
So
we have
good on both sides.
A lot of people, when we give it to them, they're kind of like, oh, yeah, this is kind of like something that came up a few years ago, but it's not really a problem. So maybe we just leave it off. It's not that big of a deal. And I think especially Eric would, Tyler would as well, but agree that that's not the way to do these things. It's to absolutely put down everything that you can think of, and it's only going to tell the future buyers that, hey, this is because they're being so thorough in this. You don't have to worry about anything else coming up. I mean, maybe there's going to be a problem or something.
Wait, did you
that,
say you don't have to worry about it?
You don't have to worry about unforeseen, issues coming up because they're so thorough about actually filling out these disclosures.
Yeah, I'm going to clarify that just a little bit. That's the history of the property. The disclosures of the history of the property, like the unforeseen things of just like, hey, we at least know how to address it in the future. Now, Minnesota, full basement, there's so many houses that have had a history of water in the basement.
Yep.
If it's been standing for, 20 or more years, it's just a guess on the time frame. To never, ever have a water issue ever anywhere in your house, okay, I'm a little suspicious on that one. But most buyers do not care that the problem happened. They want to know, what did you do to fix it?
Yes.
Right.
And has there been a problem ever since? We see some pump back up. Oh, yeah, we had to replace all the sheetrock, baseboard, everything like that. So, okay, that's not a big deal. But if they go in there and they said they've never had a history of it and they get a good inspector or a good agent saying, hey, you see all this water wicking up? I'm pointing over here, but the cameras can't see it. But water wicking up the wall here, that was water at some point. And you can kind of see it all the way around, but there's nothing on the disclosures. So a little bit more, you get a little bit distrustworthy of the seller at that point of saying,
Right.
hey, what do you know here? And you've been here for 25 years.
Yep.
So,
And to address what Tom was saying is, to use myself as an example, last spring when we were selling, when I filled out the seller disclosures, one, just given my position, that put me, I think a unique position where it's like, no, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do with this. But two, I didn't want to run into problems down the road either. I didn't want to ever hear anything about that house again. And so
watch your hands. I'm done.
It's making it sound like he hated the house or something. But
No, we loved it there, but I was like, I don't want to hear anything about this after we sell. So like my seller disclosures I was writing in the margins and I was saying, this is what we did, this is what happened, this is how we fixed, like everything. And I even had a comment from one agent. I said, yep, I filled out, I think I probably over-disclosed on the disclosures, but just let me know if they have any questions. They said, yeah, we read through that. We have no questions. That was great. They're like,
Well, it's because I don't like to talk to you.
Well, and some people are going to see that and be like, wow, there's a lot wrong with this house. But it's quite the opposite. Like, at least in my mind, when I see that
when
gives,
you actually read through it.
right, that gives me comfort. Where in Tyler's example, where you see a very clean disclosure, there's one mark in, the notes or something like that. But then you walk through the house and you start seeing problems. It's like, that's concerning to me.
When I see a seller disclosure that has nothing written on it, they have no problems, and if they've lived there for more than 1 year, I go, okay, something didn't get filled out because nobody's house is perfect for more than 1 year.
Right. And generally speaking. But yes, it's that history. You give them some grace if it's a short time period, less than a year. Maybe something didn't go wrong. And the requirement really is to disclose what you know of the home, period. But it's like, did something happen during your ownership here? Because you're not held responsible for what happened before,
right?
If you didn't know it. Now, if you didn't know to look that there was some water damage underneath the stairs, and when you went to sell, hey, we didn't know about that either, or we didn't know our dishwasher had a slight leak in it because there was no evidence of it. But then you pull it out. So everything is kind of speculative, and it's to the best of your knowledge, and it is there's a point of maybe you went over disclosure, but it's probably more protection because you have a real estate license.
Yep.
You're held to a higher standard of it. Where a home seller is, oftentimes they'll ask, all right, well, this happened, oh, okay, here, how can we explain this and what it was? Issue, what did you do to fix it? What did you do to mitigate any of the damage? And then have you had a problem ever since? You kind of tell the story, in a few sentences, and sometimes they require a whole page.
Yeah. Yep. So when you're having conversations from sellers, are you describing that the same way, saying, hey, this is to protect you, fill this out? What I tell people is to the best of your knowledge.
Yeah.
Kind of what you said. You're not held responsible for things that you don't know.
Right. So I one of the big questions I always ask, you ever have any water in the basement? Sometimes when you go down to a storage room and you can't see the sump pump basket.
Yep.
Because they've got stuff all over there, or you might see that everything's on bricks. Like it's kind of a telltale sign. Hey, have you had water in the basement? Oh, just that one spring when it was, okay. It's something we have to disclose, and some sellers get a little upset with that and say, "No, this protects you." Again, and my go-to is, most buyers don't care that something did happen. They want to know, is the problem continuing? Did you fix it?
Right.
I wonder if I learned that from you, because I say the same thing.
Yeah, probably. Disclosure alternatives. That's a little bit different than a seller's disclosure.
Yeah. And that one's a little bit more of a gray area of exactly when do you use it. But I tell people that if it's a rental or they inherited the home from a person, most of the time it's, have you ever lived in this home? And if the answer is no, at the very least, I say we consider it. Sometimes if someone's done substantial work to the house, if they've remodeled it, then I say, okay, you know more about the house than some people who've lived in their home for 10 years.
So there is a law now in California where remodelers and flippers have to do the full disclosure. They can't do the alternatives anymore. No. They have to disclose all of that. And I think it's in California. It's probably in other states too. But, in the land of flipping, it's like, yes, you do know more. You know exactly what it is. You looked behind the walls. You know what's there. So it kind of protects the consumer at that point. And
so for those who don't know what alternatives are, it's a disclosure form that basically they waiving, all the rights to knowledge of the property, if that makes sense. It's basically them just saying, hey, we don't know anything about this property. Here's our, signed piece of paper.
Yeah. Yep. Now there's some still required disclosures on that. Is there a well?
Right.
Is there septic?
Yep.
Are you aware of any methamphetamine production or consumption on the property? Standard bullet point disclosures.
Yeah. But even the way it's phrased, are you aware of? So there are some people, I had one of those last year where people inherited a property. It was a brother and a sister. They were selling and they were like, we don't know anything about this house. And including, it was the well question, because it was an older house in town. And I said, do you know if there's is there a well room underneath the front steps? And they go, I have no idea. And so they didn't know. And it turns out there was a well room. There was no well in it.
Right.
But that was where we were. I tell them it's to the best of your knowledge. And that was an example where I'm like, you absolutely should be using this waiver form. You don't know anything about this place.
Right.
Yeah. Just a funny story about disclosures is there's one little section of it that has, what's the verbiage of it, of paranormal activity or something like that?
Ghosts.
The ghosts. Yeah. So there's one little section that when my clients were filling it out, he thought it was funny, so he circled it and was like, what's this? And I just explained, I was like, I mean, technically, if you know of something, you're supposed to disclose it. And because he circled it, we went and posted it on the supplements on the MLS. And I had almost every single person who went and showed that property gave me a call and was like, what's this part of the disclosures?
Right.
Is this place haunted? And I was like, no.
He was curious.
He was curious, but because it's on a perception that's not something that's maybe actually there, there's no duty to disclose if there is paranormal activity. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
It's not like, are there ghosts or not ghosts?
Yeah.
It's like, you don't, one of the big things is, Aunt May died here. Do we have to disclose that? No, you don't, unless a crime was committed. Was she murdered here? Or was, suicide? You don't have to disclose, anybody with like a, disease or you don't have to do that, on the personal side of it, unless a crime was committed. So I mean, there's some weird things like that tucked away in the disclosure, and ghosts. That's fine. But it's funny that they were that curious about why'd you circle paranormal activity.
Yeah,
It actually kind of freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd question it. If I saw that circled, I'd be like, they didn't say anything, but I definitely want to know.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing that I found out is there's so many more homes than you think that have had people actually pass away in it. I mean, even my first condo, I didn't know that somebody passed away in it until I lived there for a little bit, and one of the neighbors was like, check this out, and showed me a picture of what the place used to look like, and it was a hoarder's house, and it was really bad. But
when you said showed you a picture, I was
Picture
curious
Yeah,
what
not
you
the
were gonna
body,
say.
not the deceased. Let's make that clear.
Yeah. I think it's generally a good idea to probably disclose if something like that happened, because neighbors are always curious, and they say, oh yeah, did you know George died in here? So I think you use your best comfort on it, but yeah, there's read through them. There's some pretty interesting stories that we get to see of through the disclosure issue of what's happening, what's not happening, and this is completely false.
Yeah, and like you said, use your judgment, because my second home that I bought, they didn't disclose anything. We moved in there and we're like, you didn't tell us about this, and so they come up, but
In their defense, it was to the best of their knowledge, and if they're not paying attention,
this would have been hard to miss.
this is free and clear in the open though.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting into the gray area of what's disclosable or not. A broken window, I probably wouldn't say no, it's not, because it's out in the open. You can see it.
Sure.
It'd be, now we took out all the studs in that wall and it's just sheetrock. Yeah, that's probably a disclosable issue.
Well,
Never had that
They'd
happen
ask
before.
about like scratches or stuff to the floor. and
No,
that would be
you had some
considered out
scratches in the
open.
floor.
Yeah,
But-
where's
no,
the
I-
line of disclosable?
Yeah, no, and that's all I'm saying is that there are things that they ask for in the disclosures that would be considered out in the open. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Anyway,
there's
talk to us about it.
Yep. So it's important, but there's really it's I think, to recap, it would be for sellers. This is to protect you in the future. It is to help you as much as you feel like it affects the sale of your house. I do think that when you are really honest, that it actually it improves the perception of your home as well, where people can look at it with more comfort, knowing that you are telling the truth.
Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a 2-year period after the sale of a home that people could actually go after you if you didn't properly disclose something.
That's
that-
arbitration.
For arbitration.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yep.
I knew I heard that somewhere.
I think the longer it goes after that, it'd be really tough to sue somebody. I mean, knock on wood, it hasn't happened. But I think the longer it goes is like, all right, well, can you prove that it happened during their ownership? The example that I usually use on, a disclosing item or an arbitratable item is make sure you say everything that you know about the property. So like an offense would be, there's bats in the attic. You don't put that down here, and the buyer moves in and they discover bats in the attic, and your neighbor goes, oh yeah, they had bats in the attic every single spring or fall whenever bats go to the attics. And
Now you got a
they
problem.
they had that. That's nowhere in the disclosures. Okay, you had a problem, you didn't disclose it, new buyer has a problem, and the neighbor verified it.
Yeah, they
All
have
right,
proof.
You now have a problem.
Yeah,
Anyway, better
All right.
safe than sorry. NorthstarProRealty.com if you want to talk about your disclosures.
Sweet.